Around the release of Paper Mario Sticker Star, it was revealed that Shigeru Miyamoto had advised the developers to focus less on story. Now, we've talked a great deal on this show about how to craft compelling narratives for games, but Miyamoto also had a point. Maybe putting tons of effort into story isn't always really necessary or incredibly beneficial, because sometimes a light sprinkling of narrative is all a game really needs. The story about Paper Mario Sticker Star caused a minor controversy and some debates about what place narrative has in games. After all, up to this point, the Paper Mario series had been known mostly for its story, at least among the Mario games. And Sticker Star, with its emphasis on mechanics rather than story, certainly wasn't, let's call it, the pinnacle of the series. So it may not have quite been the correct game to apply this thinking to. But are there places where this maxim makes sense? Not every single game really requires, or has room for, a sweeping narrative. In fact, the original Doom cut out almost its entire story because the game played better without it. However, it's also important to realize that the de-emphasizing of the story of a game doesn't mean removing the narrative entirely. Parts of the Doom story Bible still influence the design of that game. Many games benefit from having the narrative not as the core reason to play, but to give context for the player's actions, or to set the tone. Most people's first spark of interest in a game doesn't often come from the mechanics, but rather, they're intrigued by the game's aesthetic or setting. And this context, this explanation for what the player is doing and why, can give meaning to the player's actions. Take a look at the mainline Super Mario games. Those games have about as simple a story as one can get, the majority of them being, rescue the princess. But okay, let's take Peach out, let's take Bowser out, let's take the whole Mushroom Kingdom aesthetic out, and leave only a progression of monochrome, disconnected obstacles built from geometric solids. Yeah, that sounds super fun. The narrative, as thin as it may be, turns those mechanics into a meaningful journey. It gives players a goal that's satisfying to complete, but more importantly, a reason why the players want to complete that goal. Just a little bit of story puts a nice bow on the whole package. You didn't just press the correct inputs to complete all the goals, you jumped through the Mushroom Kingdom and rescued the princess from the big bad turtle, ox, dragon thing. And this appeal for stories and fantasies can be especially powerful for games that rely on retaining long-term players. Mahjong Crimes: Murder on the Orient Express is your basic Mahjong tile matching game, but they added a soupçon of Boiro to keep the players coming back. And it worked. Or, think of all the EverQuest and Skyrim stories we all tell each other about daring raids or hilarious dungeon hijinks. Those are the moments that stick with players and make their play experience memorable. We don't usually regale our friends with epic stories about stat increases and completion percentages. Be impressed. Even Major League Sports have a small inherent narrative created around them. Most people who watch sports root for their favorite team or player. And that's because, if they win enough times, they'll make it to the elite conference, where if they beat all the teams there, they'll play for the championship. And do you want to know why that sounds like the exact story of Pokemon? Because, drumroll please, it is. It's a story about hope and determination, hard work and training, all striving for a simple goal. And if that goal is achieved, then there's jubilation, celebration, and the joy of a hard-earned victory. And if it's missed, there'll be heartbreak, pathos, and hope for another year. It's simple, but it's compelling. And it's why so many things borrow this easy-to-understand narrative to give meaning to an otherwise meaningless activity, like moving a ball down a field. And even if you're convinced that your game doesn't need a story, don't be so quick to jettison all semblance of narrative for the sake of pure gameplay. Because while narrative can sometimes develop out of the mechanics, other times it works better the other way around. Even just picking a specific theme can help inspire all sorts of mechanics. For example, a game set in Las Vegas will scream out for something involving gambling. Or heck, go back and watch our Mechanics of Character Design episode to see how even a Match 3 game can use narrative to inspire a variety of gameplay mechanics. Narrative context is also a handy way to cover up arbitrary technical limitations. For instance, what if your playtesters keep asking why they can't bring objects into the elevators at the end of each level? But give it a sci-fi theme, and bam, you can add a vaporizing force field before each elevator like Portal did. And that little bit of narrative context makes the fact you can't bring objects to the next level feel like that's just how this world works, and not a restriction that has to be done so the game's engine won't break. Certain game types lend themselves more to engrossing narratives than others do. But even those games we don't traditionally go to for story can still be enhanced by having some of it. Because all things said, humans identify with characters and settings, usually more than they do with abstract mechanics. We connect with our fictional friends, whether they're words on a page or squares moving across a screen. So giving games that little bit of meaningful context, even when integrated subtly, is an effective tool to keep players interested. Not to mention, it can help answer the question, why do I want to play this game?